On October 28, 1944, 13 American soldiers entered a German bunker labeled A-42 near the Belgian border to investigate rumors of medical experiments. Only one came back. The survivor, a nurse-turned-operative, known afterward as the Ghost, staggered out 6 hours later, drenched in blood and silent about what had happened inside. 3 days after that, she vanished without a trace. The army declared her killed in action, sealed the bunker with concrete, and classified the records for 50 years. In 1994, when an elderly Indianapolis woman named Dorothy Mills died, her granddaughter found a hidden room, 43 photographs of dead Nazi officers, dated 1945, 1952, meticulous surveillance logs, and a journal that opened with one sentence: "My name was Ruth Hawthorne. I was the ghost. I didn't die in that bunker. I found something that made me disappear." What Ruth Hawthorne uncovered in A-42 would explain why America's deadliest woman soldier chose to vanish at the peak of her legend, and why she spent the next 5 decades hunting everyone who knew what lay buried beneath that concrete tomb. September 15, 1944. Field Hospital No. outside Nancy, France. Ruth Hawthorne had been awake 36 hours. Her hands stayed steady as she changed dressings on wounds that would haunt her dreams. 2 years as an army nurse had taught her to run on exhaustion, to smile when boys died in her arms, to remain calm when shells shook dust from the ceiling. She was adjusting Private Morrison's morphine drip when the trucks rolled up. "Sounds like resupply," Harrison said, without looking up from surgery. Ruth listened. The engines were wrong, too fast, too many, and coming from the German side. The doors slammed open. 12 SS soldiers filed in, weapons at the ready, but moving with a casual cafe-level confidence. Their commander was young, maybe 25, with a scar through his left eyebrow, and eyes that looked past people instead of at them. He held a clipboard and spoke accented English. "We need medical supplies, morphine, sulfa, bandages." "This is a Red Cross facility," Harrison objected, still in his surgical gown. "You have no authority here." The commander glanced at his clipboard, then at the rows of beds. "But first, we have a list to complete." He walked to the nearest cot, Sergeant Williams from Ohio, 3 days post-op, with shrapnel wounds. He checked the name, nodded, and shot Williams in the head. The report of the gun was impossibly loud. Men able to move scrambled. Those who could not simply stared. Harrison lunged. The commander didn't look at him, only nodded to a man beside him. A knife flashed. Harrison's throat opened in a neat line. He dropped to his knees, hands clawing for life, his eyes finding Ruth across the room. "Hide," he mouthed in his last breath. Ruth slid into the supply closet. Through the crack, she watched them. 23 wounded Americans, 23 names on a list, 23 shots. Morrison tried to crawl under his cot with his one good arm, leaving a bloody trail as his wound reopened. They shot him twice, once to stop him, once to finish him. He was 19 and had shown Ruth photos of his girl back home. The killings took 12 minutes. Then the men looted medical supplies, while one whistled a tune Ruth recognized. Lily Marlene and another told a joke in German. They left as casually as they'd come. Ruth waited 20 minutes before emerging. The ward was silent, save for the dripping of blood. She checked bed to bed, finding no one alive. Under Morrison's cot, his rifle lay where he'd hidden it. His fingers had gouged the floor, trying to reach it. Ruth picked up the rifle. She'd never wanted to shoot. Her father had tried to teach her once, but she had always said she was there to save lives. The rifle was warm. Outside, Allied vehicles sounded closer. They would discover the massacre, file reports, send telegrams. The SS unit would likely melt into the chaos of retreat, unless someone followed them. She did. Her father had taught her to track deer in Pennsylvania woods. This was similar, except deer didn't shoot the wounded. The SS had left obvious tracks. 12 men in a truck, heading northeast. The rain started, but she kept the spoor. 3 miles out she found the group stopped in a bombed village, dividing supplies. Through the scope, Morrison had taken good care of it. She watched them. The commander smoked. The whistler still whistled. Another cleaned his knife. Ruth had watched boys die in her hands. In that hospital she had, in a way, died too. The Ruth who only healed no longer existed. The woman who picked up Morrison's rifle was something else. A hunter, the Wehrmacht would later whisper about. She steadied the rifle on a broken wall and picked her target. Not the head, too quick, but the stomach, just below the vest. Pain would be slow, fear would have time to settle in. She squeezed the trigger. The commander doubled over, clutching his belly. Chaos erupted. She moved before they could recover. Her second shot caught the whistler. The third took the man cleaning the knife in the throat. 9 remained. She had 47 rounds. Ruth Hawthorne is dead. Has been since 1944. There's a situation, Nevada. Children are involved. Her hands steadied. Always children. Talk. Not here. There's a car. We walk to the park. You in front. They walked like old friends. Her shears hidden in the laundry basket she still carried. At the park, empty on a Tuesday morning, she let him sit on a bench. She remained standing, ready to run or fight. He pulled out a folder, hands careful and slow. Project MK Ultra, he said. American program, using some of the A-42 research you didn't destroy. I destroyed it all. You destroyed the German copy. But Control had already transmitted preliminary findings before you shot him. He showed her photographs. An underground facility, medical equipment, children in hospital beds. Dorothy's hands went cold. Where? Nevada test site. Underground, hidden in the nuclear testing program. The radiation keeps people away. Perfect cover. He pulled out more photos. 12 children so far. Volunteers, they say. Orphans who won't be missed. Just like A-42. Why? She whispered. Tell me. Because some of us remember what you did in that bunker. What Control was willing to allow. Not all of us agree with continuing the research. But not enough to stop it officially. No, that's why we need the ghost. Dorothy thought about the cake on her counter. Catherine's birthday party that afternoon. James coming home with presents. 10 years of normal life. I have a family. We know, that's why we're asking. Not ordering, but Mrs. Mills. Dorothy, those children have no one else. She took the folder. I'll need things. Whatever you need. And when it's done you forget I exist. The agency forget. Everyone forgets. Agreed. And if anyone comes near my family, the ghost hunts again. Understood. March 18th, 1962, Nevada. Dorothy told James she was visiting her sick aunt in Chicago. He kissed her goodbye, told her to be careful. Catherine hugged her, still happy from her birthday party. The flight to Nevada felt like traveling backward through time. The woman in seat 12B was Dorothy Mills, suburban mother. The woman who walked off the plane was someone else. Someone who'd killed 34 people, and was ready to add to that count. The contact met her at a motel outside the test site. He had equipment, rifle, pistol, knife and credentials that would get her onto the base. The facility is here, he said, pointing to a map. Sub-level 4 of the medical research building. Security is tight, but there's a maintenance tunnel. I know how to infiltrate a bunker. He looked at her. 40 years old, graying hair, laugh lines from a decade of pretending to be happy. You really are her, the ghost. No, I'm a mother who's very good at certain things. She entered the base at shift change. Just another nurse, reporting for duty. The credentials were perfect. The uniform authentic. No one looked twice at a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. The medical building was new, modern, efficient. Nothing like A-42's cramped bunker. But the smell was the same. Antiseptic and fear. She took the elevator to sub-level 2, then found the maintenance stairs. 2 more levels down, past radiation warnings, and restricted access signs. The country's nuclear shield, hiding its darkest secret. The door to sub-level 4 required a key code. She waited, patient as she'd once waited for German patrols. 20 minutes later, a doctor emerged. She caught the door before it closed and slipped inside. The corridor beyond was bright, clinical. Through observation windows, she saw them. 12 children, ages 8 to 14, some in beds, some in testing rooms, all with the hollow eyes she remembered from A-40. The experiments were pharmaceutic, drugs to enhance memory, reaction time, intelligence, creating super soldiers through chemistry rather than surgery. Less cruel than A-42, but still using children as test subjects. A doctor emerged from one room. making notes on a clipboard. Dorothy recognized him, not personally, but the type, the same detached curiosity she'd seen in German researchers, the ability to see children as data points. She followed him to his office. He was alone, filing reports, when she entered and locked the door behind her. "Excuse me, who are?" The knife was at his throat. Before he could finish, "How many children?" "I don't." She cut him, just enough to draw blood. "How many?" 12 here, more at other sites. Other sites, of course. The research data. Where? Mainframe. Sub-level 5, access codes. He gave them. Trembling, she knocked him unconscious and tied him with his own belt and tie. He'd live, but he'd remember. Sub-level 5 was server rooms and filing systems. She found the mainframe, used the codes, file after file of experiment data. American children being given untested drugs. Their reactions catalogued with the same cold precision the Nazis had used. She began destroying it all. Magnets for the tape drives, fire for the papers, 20 years of research turning to smoke and damaged circuits. The alarm starts. Security would come soon, but first, the children. She ran back to sub-level 4. The doors to the children's rooms were locked electronically. She shot the control panel, and they all opened at once. Children emerged, confused, scared, some unsteady from the drugs. "Follow me," she said in her mother voice, the one that had soothed Catherine through nightmares. "We're leaving." Security arrived as they reached the stairs. 3 guards, young men just doing their jobs, not knowing what they were protecting. Dorothy shot them all in the knee. Painful, crippling, but not fatal. They'd live. The children didn't need to see more death. They climbed 4 flights of stairs with drugged children, some barely able to walk. Dorothy carried the smallest, a girl maybe 8, who kept apologizing for being tired. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're doing great." They emerged into chaos. Alarms blaring, security converging, but also something else. Military police, FBI, reporters. Her contact had done more than provide equipment. He'd blown the whistle. The children were taken to regular hospital. The facility was shut down officially for safety violations. The real reason would be buried in classified files. Dorothy slipped away in the confusion. Just another nurse, evacuated from a radiation leak. She approached the checkpoint, with others fleeing the fighting. Old women, children, a few wounded soldiers. The guards were checking everyone, but casually, they weren't expecting their ghost to walk up in daylight. "Papier," the guard demanded. She produced the papers she'd taken from a dead nurse weeks ago. Keeping her head down, shoulders hunched, just another exhausted medical worker. He barely glanced at them, then grabbed her arm. Mal's sleeve. He wanted to see her arm. She rolled it up, showing nothing. He frowned, called to the officer. Ruth's hand drifted to the knife hidden under the burial shroud. The officer approached, studied her. "Medical personnel?" She nodded. "Which unit?" She pointed to her throat, mouthing words without sound. Mute from trauma. She'd seen enough shell-shocked nurses to mimic the symptoms. The officer's expression softened slightly, another one broken by the war. He waved her through. "The medical convoy left an hour ago. You'll have to walk." She nodded gratefully, shuffled past with her wrapped body. 3 kilometers beyond the checkpoint, she retrieved her rifle and disappeared into the forest. The bunker was close now. She could feel it like a weight in the air. October 17, 1944. Ruth found A42. It didn't like much. A concrete entrance built into a hillside, camouflaged with vegetation. 2 guards at the door, bored, smoking. A radio antenna suggested underground communications. Tire tracks showed regular vehicle traffic. She circled the perimeter, finding ventilation shafts, an emergency exit, and what looked like a pre-war drainage tunnel, sealed with a metal grate. Multiple entry points, but all guarded or secured. Through binoculars, she watched the shift change. 12 guards total, rotating in 4-hour shifts. Medical staff came and went. She counted 6 doctors, an unknown number of support personnel, and once, just before dark, she saw them. Children at a window. 3 faces, pale, eyes hollow. One had bandages around his head. Another's arm was in a sling that looked wrong. The angle suggested the arm was longer than it should be. Ruth felt the familiar cold rage settle in her chest. The same feeling from Field Hospital 7, but refined now. Focus. She set up position on the ridge, plotting angles, counting distances. The smart play was to wait for Control's backup. 12 guards plus interior security was too much for one person, but those children were in there now, suffering now. She'd watched 23 Americans die while she hid in a closet. She wouldn't hide again. One girl's eyes had been replaced with compound lenses, like an insect's. What did they do? Wilson asked, holding a child whose spine curved outside his body. Ruth found the research notes, coded but clear enough. They were trying to create enhanced soldiers, testing how far the human body could be modified and still function. These 12 were the failures, too changed to be useful, too valuable to dispose of. Monsters, Patterson's. Children, Ruth corrected. They were children. One by one, the 12 died. Some within minutes, their modified bodies unable to function outside the chemical suspension. Others lasted hours, fighting for each breath. Ruth held each one, learned their names from the German documentation. Klaus, age 8, modified for underwater operations. Marie, age 10, neural enhancements that had destroyed her motor function. Hans, age 13, attempted bone reinforcements that had turned his skeleton into something like rubber. She memorized each name, each face, each modification. These weren't statistics or intelligence. They were children who'd been tortured in the name of science. Control stood in the doorway, radio in hand. Command wants this facility secured. The research here could advance our own medical programs by decades. No ghost. My name is Ruth Hawthorne. She stood, Morrison's rifle in her hands. I was a nurse at field hospitals. I watched 23 Americans die. I've killed 91 Germans in 6 weeks. And I'm telling you, this ends here. She moved through the laboratory, shooting equipment, destroying documents. Harper and the others joined her, smashing computers, burning files. Control screamed about court-martial, about treason, about valuable intelligence lost. In the last filing cabinet, Ruth found something that stopped her cold. American letterhead, OSS, signature, dated night. It was a cooperation agreement. The Americans had known about A42, had been receiving reports, were planning to acquire the research after the German defeat. You knew, she said to Control. His face was stone. War requires difficult choices. You knew they were experimenting on children. We knew they were conducting enhancement research, not the specifics. Ruth shot him in the knee. He screamed, falling. The other soldiers raised their weapons, unsure who to aim at. The war is almost over, Ruth said, standing over Control. Germany's finished. But this, whatever this is, it's just beginning, isn't it? You want to continue the research, use what they learned. Control gasped through the pain. You don't understand what's at stake. The Soviets have their own programs. If we don't advance, we'll be left behind. By torturing children, by understanding human potential. He struggled to sit up. You're proof it works. Your shooting, your ability to track, to hunt, your enhanced ghost. The hospital massacre exposed you to their aerosol test. You're one of them. Ruth went cold. What? Why do you think you never miss? Why can you track targets like an animal? The exposure changed you, made you into the perfect killer. No, you're not. He pulled out a folder, which is why we're making you official. No name, no unit designation, just operational clearance to hunt behind enemy lines, and if you refuse, then you're a deserter who abandoned her post during a massacre, court-martial, possible execution. He lit a cigarette. But we both know you won't refuse. You like what you've become. Ruth said nothing. He was wrong. She didn't like it. But she was good at it. Better than good. Perfect. There's an SS medical unit operating near here, Control said, sliding her a map. They've been collecting specific prisoners, taking them somewhere designated A42. We need to know what they're doing. You want me to follow them? I want you to do what you do. Thin their ranks. Make them panic. Maybe one will talk before dying. Ruth studied the map. The area was heavily forested, perfect for ambushes. Equipment, whatever you need, but you work alone. No backup, no support. You're a ghost, after all. October 3rd, 1944. Woods outside Met. Ruth had been watching the SS medical convoy for 2 days. 3 trucks, 12 guards, 4 medical personnel. They had stopped at a temporary camp, processing prisoners. But not normal prisoners. They were taking children, French, Belgian, even some German children, ages 8 to 14, all healthy, all terrified. Through the scope she watched them examining the children like livestock, measuring skulls, checking eyes, taking blood samples. One doctor, older with wire-rimmed glasses, made notes in a leather journal. She'd already identified their pattern. Guards changed every 4 hours. The medical staff slept in the middle truck. The children were kept in the rear vehicle, locked in, but unguarded between midnight and 4 a.m. Tonight she'd start. The first guard never heard her coming. The knife, she'd gotten good with the knife, slipped between his ribs while he was lighting a cigarette. She left the ace of spades on his chest. The death card. The second guard at the other end of the camp took a bullet through the temple from 200 yards. A suppressed rifle. Control had given her, quiet enough that no one woke. 2 down, 10 guards left, plus the medical staff. She moved through the camp like smoke, placing small charges. Control had provided, not enough to destroy the trucks, but enough to cause chaos. Then, she positioned herself on a ridge, overlooking the camp, and waited for dawn. The guards found the bodies at sunrise. Panic erupted, shouting in German, weapons drawn, everyone scrambling for cover. That's when Ruth triggered the charges. Small explosions, more sound than damage, but enough to make them think they were under full assault. In the chaos she started shooting. The radio operator first. No calls for help. Then the officer trying to organize resistance. Then 2 guards who broke cover, trying to reach better positions. 7 left, plus the medical staff. They tried to flee in the trucks, but she'd anticipated that. She'd shot out the tires on the first vehicle, causing it to crash and block the road. The guards spilled out, firing blindly into the forest. She picked them off methodically, one trying to flank her position, another attempting to reach the radio in the crashed truck, a third who thought hiding behind a tree would save him. The bullet went through the tree, and through him. 4 left. That's when one of the medical staff emerged from the middle truck, hands raised, waving a white cloth. "Stop," he called in accented English. "We are medical personnel, Geneva Convention." Ruth put a bullet at his feet. He stumbled back. "The children," she called, "release them. We cannot. They are part of important medical research." She shot him in the shoulder, spinning him down. The other medical staff rushed out to help him. Through the scope she could see the older doctor with wire-rimmed glasses, the one who'd been taking. He was looking directly at her position, though he couldn't possibly see her. "You are the ghost," he called out, "the one they whisper about." Ruth said nothing. "I am Dr. Ernst Hoffmann," he continued. "What we do here is for the advancement of medical science. These children." She shot the doctor trying to bandage his colleague's shoulder. He dropped, clutching his thigh. "Release them," she repeated. The last 2 guards tried to rush her position while she was talking. She'd expected that too. 2 shots, 2 bodies rolling down the hillside, 2 more cards to place later. Just the medical staff left now. 4 men, 2 wounded. She emerged from cover, rifle trained on them. Up close they looked smaller, older, afraid. Dr. Hoffmann was still standing, still studying her with those intelligent eyes. March 20th, 1962. Indianapolis. She came home to find James cooking dinner, Catherine doing homework. Normal, perfect, safe. "How was your aunt?" James asked, kissing her. "Better, much better." That night, after her family slept, Dorothy sat in her basement workshop. James thought she was refinishing furniture down there. She wrote in a new journal. The list continues. Not Nazi war criminals, but American researchers who've forgotten that children aren't laboratory rats. "I found evidence of 6 more sites. The ghost may need to hunt again," but she never got the chance. The radiation exposure from the Nevada site, from walking through contaminated areas to reach the children, had been severe. The doctors found the cancer 8 months later. They gave her a year. She lived for 32 more. Spite, the doctors called a miracle, they said. Dorothy knew better. She had a daughter to raise, a husband to love, a granddaughter to train. Death would have to wait. She taught Catherine to shoot, just rabbits, dear. Taught her to notice everything, remember everyone. Taught her skills a suburban mother shouldn't know. And when Claire was born, Dorothy looked at her granddaughter and saw it immediately. The same steady hands, the same sharp eyes, the same potential for violence, carefully controlled. She trained Claire too, better than she'd trained Catherine. because Dorothy could feel it in her cancerous bones. The programs hadn't ended. They'd just hidden deeper. Someone would need to stop them. Someone would need to be the ghost. October 28, 1994. 50 years after Dorothy Mills died in her sleep, surrounded by family. Her last words: the basement, behind the water heater, everything you need. The obituary mentioned her church work, her apple pies, her devotion to family. It didn't mention the 13-4 confirmed kills, the 43 Nazis hunted across 7 years, the American program she'd destroyed, or the children she'd saved. Ruth Hawthorne had died in 1944. The ghost was legend. Dorothy Mills was just a grandmother. But in the basement, behind the water heater, waited the truth: photos, documents, weapons, and a list. Not of the dead, but of those still hunting children, still experimenting, still believing humans could be improved through torture. The ghost was dead. But ghosts, by definition, never really die. They just wait for someone new to carry their name. October 29, 1994. The day after Dorothy's funeral, Claire Morrison sat in her grandmother's basement, surrounded by death. Not just the photos of 1344 corpses. One was being considered for the Supreme Court. They can't all be guilty. No, but they all know. They all stayed silent while the research continued. The woman stood to leave. Your grandmother killed the ones who act. These are the ones who allowed. You decide which is worse. December 15, 1994. Washington, D.C. Claire had spent 6 weeks researching the names on Dorothy's final list, following paper trails, financial records, and connections. The woman at Union Station had been right. They all knew. They'd all profited from silence. But one name stood out: Director Harold Morrison. No relation. He had personally authorized 7 black sites where enhancement research continued, using volunteer soldiers who didn't know what they were volunteering for. He lived in a suburban fortress, all cameras and guards. But Dorothy had taught Claire that everyone had patterns, weakness. Morrison's was his weekly visit to his son's grave. Korea, 1952. Every Sunday, dawn, alone. Claire waited in the pre-dawn darkness, Dorothy's Luger heavy in her pocket. She could kill him, one shot, like Dorothy would have. Justice for the unnamed victim. Morrison arrived on schedule, flowers in hand. He knelt at the grave, head bowed, the perfect target. Claire stepped out, gun visible but not raised. Director Morrison. He didn't turn. You're Ruth's granddaughter. I wondered when you'd come. Dorothy. Her name was Dorothy Mills. Her name was Ruth Hawthorne, and she was the finest killer America ever produced. He stood and faced her. I was at Field Hospital 7, you know. Arrived 3 hours after the massacre. Saw what she saw. The difference is, I reported it. She acted on it. You knew about 042. We all knew. We needed to know what the Germans had learned. War requires terrible choices. The war ended 50 years ago. Did it? Or did it just change shape? He pulled out a photograph. Children in beds, but not suffering, laughing, playing video games. Current program, all volunteers. Proper medical care, enhancement through careful pharmaceutical adjustment, not torture. Using children, sick children, terminal cases. We offer them hope. Experimental treatments that might save them while advancing human potential. Claire kept the gun steady, and if they die, they were dying anyway. But some live. Some become more than they were, like my grandmother. Morrison smiled sadly. Your grandmother was an accident. Aerosol exposure at Field Hospital 7 triggered latent capabilities. We've been trying to replicate it for 50 years. Never quite succeeded. So you keep experimenting. We keep trying to protect America. The Soviets had their own programs. Now the Chinese do. If we don't advance, we fall behind. Using children, using volunteers. Claire thought about Dorothy's choice. Kill the monster or become one. But Morrison wasn't a monster. He was worse. A bureaucrat who'd normalized horror. The names on Dorothy's list, the ones she didn't kill, all good men who made hard choices, all complicit in continuing Nazi research, all protecting America from its enemies. He turned back to his son's grave. My boy died in Korea because we didn't have enhanced soldier. How many American boys would have lived if we'd succeeded earlier? Claire could have argued, could have pointed out the moral horror of his logic. Instead, she said, Dorothy left more than just names. She documented everything, every program, every facility, Every child who died for your research. I've sent copies to 12 major newspapers. They publish tomorrow, unless—
I'm just a widow traveling. Control is dead, the officer said. Infection from his knee wound. Tragic. He stood. Enjoy your travels, Mrs. Mills. I hear Argentina is lovely this time of year. After he left, Dorothy opened the folder. 15 names from her list. All booked on the same ship. Traveling together for safety. Thinking numbers would protect them. They were wrong. July 18th, 1947, Buenos Aires. Dorothy had been in Argentina for 2 years, establishing herself as a grieving widow who'd come to start over. She taught English, volunteered at the local church, baked for neighbors. Everyone knew sweet, sad Dorothy Mills. No one connected her to the 18 German immigrants who'd died of heart attacks, accidents, or suicides since 1945. Hans Miller was next. She'd saved him for special attention. He'd been the lead researcher on the children's modification. He lived well in Buenos Aires, practicing medicine under a false name, protected by the network of escaped Nazis, who called themselves the Organization. She followed him for months, learning his routine, his guards, his weaknesses. He had a daughter now, 8 years old, the same age as Marie, the girl whose brain he'd exposed at Alf. Dorothy watched the girl play in the park, while Miller sat on a bench reading. A loving father, a monster, both things true at once. She could have killed him there, one shot from a distance, or a knife in the crowd, but that would leave his daughter traumatized, blood on her dress. Nightmares, forever. Dorothy had become death. But she wasn't cruel, not to children. She waited 3 more days until Miller was alone at his clinic. Working late, no guards, no witnesses. He was reviewing patient files when she entered. Herr Miller. He looked up, confused, then recognition, then terror. You're dead. The ghost died at Alf. Ghosts don't die, she said. They haunt. He reached for a gun in his drawer. She was faster. Morrison's training. Even without Morrison's rifle. The gun skittered across the floor. My daughter will grow up without you, she said. But she'll grow up unlike Marie, unlike Hans, unlike the 12 children you tortured. I was following orders, he rasped. It was war. The war's been over for 2 years. She gave him a choice. The knife or the poison. He chose poison, begging her to make it look natural for his daughter's sake. She agreed. The death certificate would say heart attack. His daughter would grieve a father, not a monster. That small mercy was all she could offer. September 3, 1952. São Paulo, Brazil. Dorothy sat in her apartment, cleaning a pistol she'd taken from her latest target. 41 down, 2 left. 7 years of hunting, and almost done. A knock at the door. She had the gun up before the second knock. Mrs. Mills, it's James Morrison, from Indianapolis. She froze. That name, Morrison, like the boy from Field Hospital 7. Through the peephole, she saw a man, early 30s, kind face, holding flowers. I know this is strange, he said through the door, but I've been looking for you. My buddy Harper said you knew my cousin Eddie from the war. Eddie Morrison, he died in France. Private Morrison, 19, from Iowa, crawling under his bed. Dorothy opened the door, gun hidden. I'm sorry, she said softly. You must be mistaken. Please, Harper said you were a nurse. Said you were with Eddie when he died. The lie came easily after 7 years of practice. I held his hand. He wasn't in pain. James Morrison cried. This stranger, crying for his cousin in her doorway. She let him in, made coffee, told comforting lies about Eddie's last moments. They talked until dawn. He was an engineer, had been stationed in the Pacific, and was traveling through South America for work. He was kind, funny, unmarked by the darkness she carried. Would you have dinner with me? He asked, as the sun rose. I know it's forward, but I feel like Eddie brought us together. Dorothy thought about the 41 men she'd killed, the 2 still on her list, the blood that would never wash clean. Yes, she said, because even ghosts got lonely. October 15, 1952. The last name on her list, Wilhelm Brenner, the administrator who'd requisitioned the children for experiments. He lived in a fortress of a house, surrounded by guards, paranoid after 7 years of his colleagues dying around him. Dorothy was 6 months pregnant with James's child. They'd married quickly, quietly. He thought her reticence was grief. She let him think that. She climbed the wall at 3 a.m., moving carefully with her changed center of gravity. The guards were lazy after years of nothing happening. She slipped past them like smoke. Brenner was in his study, unable to sleep. He saw her in the mirror and turned slowly. "You're pregnant." "Yes, and you still came. A life growing inside me doesn't erase the 12 who died in my arms." He looked older, exhausted. "Will it ever end? This hunting tonight? And then what?" "Then Dorothy Mills goes home to Indianapolis, becomes a mother, forgets she was ever anything else." "Can you forget?" She thought about that. 7 years of hunting, 42 kills. Since the war ended, the weight of it all. "No," she said. "But I can pretend." She made it quick. He'd been expecting death for 7 years. That was punishment enough. She left the last playing card, the ace of hearts, and walked out past the sleeping guards. James was waiting at the hotel. Where were you?" "Couldn't sleep. Walked to clear my head." He held her, hands gentle on her swollen belly. "Come home with me to Indianapolis. Let's raise our family away from all this sadness." Dorothy Mills nodded, kissed him, and let him believe she was just a war widow finding love again. Ruth Hawthorne was dead. The ghost was legend. The hunt was over. But that night as James slept, she wrote in her journal, 43 confirmed post-war. Total count. "The list is complete, but the work may not be done. Others are out there. Other programs. Other experiments. Other monsters. If they come for my children, I'll become the ghost again. But for now, I'll be Dorothy Mills, suburban mother, Sunday school teacher. I'll bake pies and plant gardens, and pretend my hands aren't stained with blood." The perfect cover for America's most dangerous woman. She burned the journal entry, but kept the skills, just in case. March 15. Dorothy Mills stood in her kitchen, frosting her daughter Catherine's 10th birthday cake, when she saw him through the window. A man at the bus stop reading a newspaper. Wrong clothes for the weather, wrong posture for a civilian watching her house. James was at work, Catherine at school. Dorothy was supposed to be alone, vulnerable. She finished the cake, washed her hands, and walked out the back door with a basket of laundry to hang. The neighbor's fence provided cover as she circled the block. 10 years of suburbia hadn't dulled her skill. The man was still there, pretending to read. She came up behind him, pressed the garden shears she'd grabbed against his kidney. "Move and I open you up right here." He tensed. "Mrs. Mills, who sent you?" "The agency. They need Ruth Hawthorne."
He laughed through his pain. "You're not hunting monsters, Ruth. You are the monster." Ruth looked at her hands. Steady, always steady. Even now, with this revelation, no trembling. She thought about the past 6 weeks. 91 kills, never missed once. Except when she was wounded. Could track anyone through any terrain. Not natural, not normal, enhanced. "Maybe I am a monster," she said quietly. "But I'm not your monster." She destroyed the rest of the facility. Every document, every piece of equipment, every sign that A42 had ever existed. The 12 dead children were wrapped in American flags, the closest thing to dignity she could give them. As they emerged from the bunker, Ruth made a decision. "I died in there," she told Harper and the others. Ruth Hawthorne entered bunker A42, and didn't come out. "That's what you'll report. Ghost? There is no ghost. Never was. Just a story to scare Germans." She looked at each of them. "Those children deserve justice, but they'll never get it. The best I can do is make sure this never happens again." She gave Harper her dog tags, Morrison's rifle, everything that identified her as Ruth Hawthorne, or the ghost. "What will you do?" Wilson asked. Ruth thought about the American documents, the implication that A42 was just one of many programs. The war might be ending, but something worse was beginning. "What I'm good at," she said. "Hunt monsters, but now I know. They don't all wear German uniforms." She walked into the forest, leaving 12 good soldiers to report that the ghost had died destroying a German research facility. Control, wounded, would tell a different story, but who would believe him? The ghost was a legend, not a person. Ruth Hawthorne was officially dead, but something else walked out of those woods. Something enhanced, something angry, something that would spend the next 50 years hunting anyone connected to projects like A4. In a year she'd be in Argentina, hunting the first of 43 Nazi scientists who'd fled there. In 5 years, she'd be married, pretending to be normal, using suburban life as cover for her real work. But that was all to come. On October 28, 1944, the ghost died in bunker A42, and Dorothy Mills, the woman who would become America's most dangerous secret, was born. November 15, 1944, Switzerland. Ruth Hawthorne no longer existed. The woman in the Zurich bank was Dorothy Mills, war widow, late of Ohio. Her papers were perfect. Control might have been a bastard, but the OSS forgers were artists. She deposited the gold teeth and wedding rings she'd taken from SS officers. Blood money, but it would fund what came next. The bank manager didn't ask questions. Swiss banks never did. In her hotel room, she studied the documents she'd saved from A42. Not the enhancement research she'd burned that, but the personnel files, names, photographs, home addresses of everyone involved. 43 doctors and researchers who tortured children in the name of science. The war would end soon. These men would disappear into the chaos, emerge with new names, new lives, unless someone stopped them. She started a journal. The work continues. Ruth died in that bunker, but her skills live on. I am Dorothy Mills. Now, I will be whoever I need to be. March 8, 1945. Lake Como, Italy. Dr. Friedrich Weber thought he was safe. The war was ending. Germany collapsing. He'd burned his uniform, grown a beard, taken a job as a village doctor. Who would look for a war criminal healing Italian farmer? Dorothy had been watching him for 3 days. He was good at his new job, gentle with patients, kind to children. It would have been easier if he'd remained a monster. She waited until he was walking home alone, late after delivering a baby. The knife went in clean between his ribs, angled up to the heart. He dropped his medical bag, turned to see his killer. You, he gasped, in German. The ghost. But you died. Ruth died, she said. I'm someone else now. I saved children too. After the war, I've saved. You experimented on 12 children at A42. I held them while they died. She let him fall, placed a playing card on his chest, the ace of spades, and disappeared into the night. The local police would find him in the morning. Assume it was revenge for collaboration. They wouldn't investigate too hard. 1 down, 42 to go. May 7, 1945. VE Day. The world celebrated. Dorothy sat in a cafe in Bern, watching people dance in the street. The radio announced Germany's unconditional surrender. The war in Europe was over, but not her war. She'd killed 4 more from her list in the past 2 months. Each one had thought themselves safe, hidden, reborn. Each one had recognized her. At the end, the ghost was becoming a different kind of legend. Not the Wehrmacht's fear, but the nightmares of escaped war criminals. An American officer sat down at her table uninvited. She recognized him. OSS. One of Control's subordinates. Miss Mills, he said carefully. Or should I say, Dorothy Mills, war widow, traveling to cope with grief. Of course. He slid a folder across the table. Some friends thought you might find this interesting. Passenger manifests. Ships leaving for South America. Amazing how many German doctors suddenly needed to immigrate. She didn't touch the folder. I don't know what you mean. The agency has interests in some of these men, scientific knowledge that could benefit America, but others, well, others have no value. It would be convenient if those others never reached their destination. By September 20, 1944, 5 days after Field Hospital No. 7, Ruth Hawthorne had ceased to exist as the Army knew her. Wearing her uniform, she had trailed the SS for 3 days across the French countryside, learning their habits and weaknesses. The 12 had split after the village, thinking separation made them safer. It only made them easier to pick off. She found 2 at a roadside checkpoint, shaking down civilians. 2 shots through helmets at 300 yards. A third she found relieving himself against a tree. She used the same knife that had taken Harrison. He died gurgling on the ground. 6 remained. From a church bell tower she watched a farmhouse they had taken as a hideout. They were jumpy, eyes constantly scanning, hands on rifles. The radio she'd captured crackled with German panic. Reports of deaths, calls for reinforcements, warnings about an American sniper team operating behind the lines. Team. They thought she was more than one person. She started leaving a token at each scene. A playing card from Morrison's pocket. He had taught the other patients poker. Now his cards marked the dead. The Germans began to call her Der Geist, the ghost. The farmhouse had 2 entrances, 3 windows, 1 chimney. The smart move would have been patience, wait for them to leave, and pick them off in the open. Ruth hadn't done the smart thing since she picked up Morrison's rifle. She climbed down at dusk, moving through tall grass as her father had taught her to stalk deer heel to toe. Weight shifted slowly. Harrison's knife was in her hand. A guard at the back door smoked. A small orange ember in the dark. She slipped up and stabbed him under the ribs, muffling him with her hand. She left the 4 of diamonds. I didn't want, did Morrison beg. The boy's face crumpled. He knew the name. Remember, did he beg when you shot him while he was crawling? I had to. They would have shot me if Ruth shot him in the knee, he screamed, falling. She walked over, stood above him as he writhed. Morrison was 19, from Iowa, had a girl named Betty who wrote him every week. She shot the other knee. Williams had a son he never met. Davis was going to be a teacher. The boy was sobbing now, begging in German. Ruth didn't understand the words, but understood the tone, the same tone 23 Americans had used. Dr. Harrison was teaching me to save lives. She raised the rifle. You taught me something else. 1 shot. Silence. She left the 5 of spades on his chest and walked out into the night. It was September 20th, 1944. In 5 days, she'd killed 11 of the 12 SS soldiers from field hospital. The 12th, she'd learned later, had been killed by a random artillery shell while fleeing. But Ruth didn't know that yet. She didn't know the OSS was already tracking her kills, that German command was starting to panic about Der Geist, that she'd already become something larger than herself. All she knew was that Morrison's rifle still had rounds, and there were more SS units out there, more men who executed the wounded, more monsters wearing uniforms. She found an abandoned barn and made camp. No fire. Fire drew attention. She ate cold rations taken from the farmhouse and cleaned the rifle by touch in the darkness. Morrison had kept it pristine. She owed him the same attention to detail. Her hands were perfectly steady. No shaking. No those would come later. Years later, when she was Dorothy Mills teaching Sunday school, and would suddenly remember the boy who looked like her cousin, begging on his knees. But that was later. Now she was learning what she was good at, what she was maybe born for. The next morning, she found another SS unit. This one was bigger. 20 men retreating toward the German border. They'd stopped to rest in a destroyed village. Through the scope she could see them eating breakfast, unaware that death was watching from the ruins of a school. 20. She had 36 rounds. More than enough. Ruth settled into position, finding that perfect stillness her father had tried to teach her. The place where breathing slowed, heartbeat steadied, and the world narrowed to what was visible through the scope. The commander first, then the radio operator, so they couldn't call for help, then work through them methodically, like checking patients on rounds, just a different kind of rounds now. She squeezed the trigger. By noon, 17 were dead. The last 3 had fled into the woods. She tracked them for 2 hours, following broken branches and boot prints, until she found them trying to hide in a ditch. They surrendered, threw down their weapons, hands up, shouting words she didn't understand but whose meaning she recognized. Ruth thought about Morrison crawling under his bed, Harrison trying to protect his patients, 23 Americans who'd gotten no mercy, 3 shots, 3 cards, the Jack, Queen and King of Hearts. That night, the German radio frequencies erupted with warnings about Der Geist, a single American operative, who never missed, never stopped, never showed mercy. Command was pulling units back from isolated positions, afraid to leave small groups vulnerable. 1 person, 1 nurse, with a rifle, and the German army was reorganizing its retreat patterns to avoid her. Ruth listened to their panic on the stolen radio, and felt something she hadn't expected. Satisfaction. Not pleasure, not joy, but the cold satisfaction of a job being done well. She was very good at this, better than she'd been at nursing, and there were so many more SS units between her and Germany, so many more monsters who needed to meet their ghost. Tomorrow, the OSS would find her. Tomorrow, they'd offer her a choice, court-martial or cooperation. Tomorrow, she'd officially become their weapon. But tonight she was just Ruth Hawthorne, sitting in the dark, cleaning Morrison's rifle, and planning how to kill more efficiently. The nurse was dead. The ghost was just beginning. October 1st, 1944, OSS Forward Operating Base outside Met. 47 confirmed kills in 2 weeks, the handler said, spreading photographs across the table. Each showed a dead German officer with a playing card placed on the body. You've terrified them more than our entire offense. Ruth stood at attention in her mismatched uniform, Still the nurse's insignia, but now with a rifle she never put down. The handler, who'd introduced himself only as Control, was studying her like she was a specimen. "They're pulling entire units back from forward positions," he continued, scared of one woman with a rifle. "I'm not finished," she said. "You don't understand what you're interrupting," he said. "Project A42 will change everything: human enhancement, disease resistance, the next step in evolution, using children. Children adapt better to the modifications. Their cells are still growing." Ruth shot him in the knee. He screamed, falling. "Where is A42? You'll never find it," he gasped. "And even if you do, you can't stop it. It's not just German research, your own people." She shot his other knee. He was crying now. "All scientific dignity gone. Northwest, 40 kilometers, bunker complex, but you're too late. The experiments are complete. The subjects are already changing." Ruth looked at the truck full of children. Through the small window, she could see their faces. Terrified, confused, some no older than her youngest brother back home. She unlocked the truck. "Run," she told them in broken French. "Run and don't stop." They scattered into the forest like frightened deer. The medical staff watched their subjects disappear. One tried to protest. Ruth shot him in the stomach, the same place she'd shot the first SS commander weeks ago. "You're making a mistake," Hoffman gasped from the ground. "Those children could have been the future, enhanced humans, stronger, smarter. They're children, not experiments," she said. She went through their documents while they bled. Maps, medical records, detailed notes about previous subjects. 12 children already at A42 undergoing something called Phase 3 modifications. October 5, 1944. Ruth watched the medical convoy burn. She dragged the medical staff to safety first. Let them live to remember, to spread fear. Hoffman would survive if help came soon. The others might not. She'd placed cards on all the dead guards, 2 through 10 of spades, saving the face cards for something special. In 2 days, she'd eliminated an entire SS medical unit, freed 20 children, and learned about it. Control would want a full report, and would want to send a team to investigate. But Ruth looked at the documents she'd taken, the photos of children in surgical beds, and knew she couldn't wait for official approval. 40 kilometers northwest. A bunker full of children being modified. She had 60 rounds left. Morrison's rifle was still perfect, despite everything. The knife was sharp. October 6, 1944. German radio frequencies were in full panic. Their Geist had struck again. Entire units were refusing to operate, in small groups. Officers were demanding transfers away from the region. One woman, one rifle. The Wehrmacht was restructuring its entire defensive position because of her, but Ruth barely heard the chatter anymore. All she could think about were those photos. Children on tables, children in cages, 12 subjects already in Phase 3, whatever that meant. She cleaned her rifle in an abandoned church, surrounded by shattered stained glass and broken pews. Tomorrow she'd start hunting toward A42. Control had promised her backup when she found it. A full squad to assault the bunker. She didn't believe him. The OSS liked her working alone. Liked their ghost being singular, mysterious, deniable. That was fine. She'd gotten used to being alone. Gotten used to the weight of Morrison's rifle, the feel of Harrison's knife, the sound of German panic on stolen radio. The nurse was long dead. The ghost was heading for A42. And God help anyone who stood between her and those children. October 10 kilometers from A42. Ruth lay in mud that smelled of rotten cordite, watching the SS checkpoint through her scope. 6 guards, 1 officer, a machine gun nest. They were checking everyone passing through, even their own vehicle. She'd been hunting toward A42 for 9 days, leaving a trail of bodies that had German command in full panic. 23 more kills. The Jack, Queen and King of Spades left on officers, the other suits for regular soldiers. But this was different. These guards weren't standard Wehrmacht. They wore SS Medical Corps insignia, the same as Hoffman's unit. They were protecting something specific. Through the scope, she watched a supply truck approach. The guards checked papers, then something else. They made the driver and passenger roll up their sleeves, examining their arms for something. Ruth pulled back into the forest to think. In her pack, she carried the documents from Hoffman's convoy. One mentioned security protocols for A42. Special identification tattoos that couldn't be forged. She needed one of those guards alive. That night she waited for the shift change. One guard always walked into the woods to relieve himself. Clockwork every 4 hours. She'd watched for 2 days, learning their patterns the way her father had taught her to learn deer trails. He was young, maybe 20, humming as he unbuttoned his trousers. The knife was at his throat before he could cry out. "Scream and die," she whispered in broken German. "Nod if you understand." He nodded, trembling. She zip-tied his hands. American ingenuity. Control had called them, and dragged him deeper into the woods. In the darkness, his terror was palpable. "WW2’s," she said. "Tell me," he babbled in German, too fast for her to follow. She pressed the knife harder. English. Kind. She cut him just enough to draw blood. English now, please. The bunker. Medical. Kinder. Children. She understood that word. How many? He held up both hands. Then 2 fingers. 12. She pulled out Hoffman's papers, pointed to the photos of children in surgical beds. "These," he nodded frantically. Yeah, experiments. Verbesser." She didn't know that word, but his tone said enough. Whatever they were doing to those children, even the guards were disturbed. "The tattoo," she said, pointing to his arm. "Show me." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a small medical caduceus, with numbers beneath. She memorized it, then considered her options. Kill him and take his uniform. But she was too small to pass for a male guard. Let him live, and risk him alerting others. She zip-tied his ankles, gagged him, and left him tied to a tree. He'd be found at shift change, but she'd be past the checkpoint by then. October 16, 1944. Dawn. Ruth had smeared mud on her face, dirtied her uniform beyond recognition. Just another refugee on the road. The rifle was hidden in a burial shroud she'd taken from a destroyed church. Just another person carrying their dead. Unless. Full shutdown. Every program, every facility, every experiment ends. Morrison laughed. "You can't stop progress with blackmail." "No, but I can expose it. Let the American people decide if they want their government torturing children for military advantage." "It's not torture." Claire shot him in the knee. He screamed, falling. She stood over him. Dorothy's ghost made flesh. "That's for every child who died in your programs. You'll live. Walk with a limp. Remember that Dorothy Mills's granddaughter could have killed you, but chose mercy." She knelt beside him. "The programs end, or the newspapers publish. You have 6 hours." She left him there, bleeding but alive. Dorothy would have killed him. But Claire had learned something from reading her grandmother's journals. Killing never stopped the programs. It just drove them deeper. Exposure was the real weapon. December 16, 1994. The Washington Post headline, "CIA Enhancement Programs Exposed. Decades of Illegal Human Experimentation." Morrison had called her bluff. Or perhaps he couldn't stop what had momentum beyond him. The story exploded. Congressional hearings. Arrests. Facilities shut down. Children rescued from programs they didn't know were killing them. Claire watched from a motel room, Dorothy's journal in her lap. The final entry, written the day before Dorothy died. "I killed 34 people trying to stop an idea. But ideas don't die from bullets. They die from light. Claire, be the light I couldn't be. Show the world what hides in its shadows." The ghost was fear. Be something better. Be truth. The phone rang. "Morrison, you've destroyed 50 years of research, made America vulnerable. I've saved children from becoming what Dorothy became. Weapons who can't stop killing. Your grandmother was a hero. My grandmother was a serial killer you created. She saved lives, yes, but she also murdered people in their sleep. For 7 years. The program started again. Claire's phone rang. Unknown number. "Miss Morrison?" A young male voice. "This is Jonathan Marsh. I believe Mr. Harper told you about me." "Yes, I have my grandfather's report. Photos too. Ones that show your grandmother shooting him. I don't want to destroy her memory, but the truth needs to come out." "What do you want?" "Everything. Every file. Every name. Every program she knew about. Full exposure of everyone involved. Or tomorrow, the world learns that Dorothy Mills wasn't hunting Nazis after the war. She was hunting witnesses to American war crimes." Claire hung up and looked at Harper. "He's not backing down. Then you have tonight to decide. Be Dorothy. Kill him. Protect the legend. Or be Claire. Let the truth destroy everything your grandmother built." That night, Claire stood outside Jonathan Marsh's house in Chicago. She could see him through the window, tucking his children into bed. His wife was in the kitchen, cleaning dishes. A normal family, unaware that death was watching. Dorothy's voice seemed to whisper, one shot through the window. Make it clean, save the legend that keeps children safe. But Claire heard another voice too, her own. The truth matters, even when it hurts. She had the loop. One bullet would solve everything. Jonathan would die. His evidence would disappear. Dorothy's legend would remain intact. But Claire thought about Timothy Marsh, a young journalist trying to expose the truth about I-42, shot by the woman who had just saved 12 children. The heroic act tainted by murder. She knocked on the door. Jonathan answered, cautious. He recognized her immediately. Miss Morrison, Mr. Marsh, we need to talk. She gave him everything, not just the names and programs, but Dorothy's journals, all of them, including the entry about killing his grandfather. October 28, 1944. Shot Timothy Marsh, young journalist, just trying to do right. I murdered him to protect secrets that shouldn't have been protected. This killing haunts me most. He was innocent. He was right. I was wrong. Jonathan read it, tears streaming down his face. She regretted it, every day for 50 years. It's why she hunted so hard after the war, trying to atone. Each Nazi she killed was penance for murdering your grandfather. It doesn't make it right. No, it does. Claire pulled out the Luger and set it on the table between them. This was hers. She taught me to use it, taught me to be her, to kill, to protect secrets. She pushed it toward him. I'm done with that. The truth matters more than legends. Jonathan stared at the gun. You came here to kill me. I came here with the option. But I'm not Dorothy. I'm not a killer. I'm just someone trying to end 50 years of lies. He pushed the gun back. Keep it. Evidence of what we were both taught to be, but chose not to become.
The story broke 3 days later, not just about Timothy Marsh's murder, but everything. A-42, the experiments, the cover-ups, Dorothy's 50-year war against those responsible. Dorothy Mills was exposed as both hero and murderer, savior and assassin. The ghost became human, flawed, complicated, tragic, and somehow, that made her more powerful. Because she wasn't a perfect legend anymore. She was proof that even good people could do terrible things for what they believed were the right reasons. And that sometimes, the hardest choice wasn't between good and evil, but between two different kinds of necessary wrong. Timothy Marsh, Claire said. Kruger shook his head. No, Timothy Marsh was already dead when that photo was taken. The man with the notebook is Private Sullivan. He was documenting everything for the army. Every experiment, every death, every child who survived. Claire felt her blood turn cold. The army was documenting it. They wanted the research. Kruger nodded slowly, his eyes on the memorial. Your grandmother knew that if Sullivan's report made it back to the U.S., the experiments would continue, so she destroyed his camera, his notes, everything. But Sullivan had already hidden copies. That's what she spent 50 years searching for. Not Nazis, but evidence of American complicity. He handed her a worn, yellowed folder, Sullivan's original report. I've had it since 1962. Dorothy gave it to me before Nevada. She told me, if I don't make it back, burn it. I couldn't. Some truths have to survive. Claire opened the folder. The report confirmed everything. That the U.S. military had known about A-42 before Dorothy's squad arrived. That orders were given to preserve the research. That plans existed to continue the experiments. It listed names, men who later became senators, CIA directors, university presidents. When the memorial ceremony began, the Belgian Prime Minister spoke first about remembering the horrors of war. The American ambassador followed, praising Dorothy Mills as a hero who had saved children from atrocity. Then it was Claire's turn. She stepped to the podium, Sullivan's report in her hands. Dorothy Mills was my grandmother, she began. She taught me to bake, to shoot, to notice everything. She killed 1334 people. She also saved 12 children from this bunker. Both are true. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she raised the folder. But here's what else is true. My grandmother spent 50 years hunting not Nazi war criminals, but American officials who wanted to continue the research. She killed to keep this secret, because she believed exposure would destroy America's moral authority during the Cold War. The ambassador stood, ready to interrupt, But Claire went on. Timothy Marsh, the journalist she was accused of murdering, was already dead when she entered the bunker, killed by Private Sullivan, under orders from U.S. Command, to prevent exposure. My grandmother took the blame to protect him. He had a wife and children. She had nothing left but the ghost she'd become. She set the report down. My grandmother wasn't a hero or a villain. She was a woman asked to do impossible things, who made impossible choices and carried impossible secrets. She killed, she saved, she lied, she protected, she was human. An elderly woman stood in the crowd. Sarah Marsh, Timothy's granddaughter. My family has hated Dorothy Mills for 30 years, she said quietly, believing she killed my grandfather. If this is true, it's true, Kruger said firmly. I was there. I saw Sullivan shoot him, and I saw your grandmother take the blame. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out Dorothy's old Luger, the same weapon she'd carried for 3 decades. This gun took at least 40 lives, she said, placing it gently on the podium. But it also saved countless children. It belongs here, in this memorial, not as a symbol of good or evil, but as proof that people can be both. After the ceremony, Claire walked through the bunker. One last time. The children's cells had become memorial chambers, their names engraved in bronze. The surgical theater had been preserved exactly as Dorothy found it, a reminder of what humans can do to one another in the name of progress. In the deepest chamber stood a wall of photographs. Every child saved from A42, and their descendants, hundreds of lives that existed because one woman chose violence to stop greater violence. There were also photos of Dorothy's victims, 43 Nazis, and several Americans. Each one someone's father, husband, son, each death, a choice Dorothy made and carried. At the center were 2 photos, side by side. Ruth Hawthorne, age 22, a fresh-faced nurse before the massacre, and Dorothy Mills, age 87, teaching Sunday school. The same woman, entirely different, both real. Claire's phone rang, her daughter calling from Indianapolis. Mom, we found something in Grandma Dorothy's house, under the floorboards. What is it? Letters, hundreds of them, from the children she saved, from their children too. Thanking her, she kept every one. Claire smiled through tears, imagining Dorothy late at night, reading those letters to balance the weight of 1344 deaths. That night in her hotel room, she wrote her own final entry, not because the truth is known, but because the truth is complicated. Dorothy Mills was a killer who saved lives, a liar who preserved truth, a monster who protected innocence. She was what war made necessary, and what peace made unbearable. She taught me to shoot, but more importantly, she taught me when not to. Her greatest gift wasn't her skill, but her warning, that becoming death, even for good, leaves scars that never heal. The experiments ended. The children lived. The price was 184 lives, and one woman's soul. History will decide if it was worth it. I only know this. Dorothy Mills carried the weight so no one else would have to. The ghost is dead. May she rest, and may we remember why she had to exist, so that one day no one will ever need to become what she became. Claire closed the journal and looked out across the Belgian countryside, where 80 years ago, a young nurse had picked up a rifle and changed history, not by killing but by choosing. Each death had been a decision, each rescue, a sacrifice, each lie a burden. Dorothy Mills had been America's most dangerous soldier, not because she never missed, but because she never stopped carrying the weight of what she'd done. 134 ghosts had followed her from battlefield to suburbia, from Ruth to Dorothy to the grave, and finally at last, they could all rest. The war was over.